Welcome back to our next episode. We will now be talking about how we connect our pieces of writing together, and that's by using appropriately formed transitions between sections or sentences or whatever you happen to be writing at the time. This generally occurs in the fourth phase of our writing. How I talk about planning the document, etc., on down. So as we're writing it down on the paper and then getting that revising and editing loop at the end, we want to make sure that our transitions work well. So let's dive in and take a look at a short slide deck. All right, transitions. This is a piece of writing we use when we want to connect things. How do we make things flow? We talked about making a map for our users. Now we use transitional elements in our writing to follow that map and help it make sure they don't get lost. Here is an example of a way you might be familiar with transitioning from gear to gear. Your car has a transmission. So if you've ever driven, you might recognize a manual stick shift up here where we use the accelerator and the clutch to go from first gear to second gear to third gear to fourth gear all the way up into fifth gear. Or you might have an automatic transmission where you use the lever to select drive or overdrive, and then the car uses its transmission and computer and all those other things to make sure that when your RPMs get in the right range, it hops up to the next gear. Well, down here at the bottom, we have a more complicated system. This is a 13-speed transmission that runs a semi-tractor trailer outfit. 13 gears, high-low range, and high-low shift patterns. Okay? Much more complicated, but gets the truck from 0 to whatever speed it needs to get to in an appropriate fashion. Each of these methods takes some learning, much like our writing does. Okay? When we're writing transitions, we are doing it for a reason. They have been called signal words, much like we discussed in our topic of signposting, slide deck 27. They are placed at key points in your writing, and they guide. We're able to follow the map in a clear, coherent manner, much like the picture on the right. We want to swim in water that looks like this, so we have good, clean, clear transitions from one part of our writing to another. We do not want to do this to our readers. We don't want clear or mucky, unclear water that we're trying to avoid touching at all costs. They give us a sense of movement. Okay? Transitions will fill in some assumptions that readers have. They can push your reader forward, or they can remind you of something that they have already read in your document, or make reference to something else outside of the document that might help you understand what's going on. Okay? Go forward or backward, and they generally roll forward in the thought-building process. The most common transition is between a paragraph, although you can transition between sentences, and that's a technique where you would write your sentence and end with a powerful point, and in the next sentence you begin by building on that thought. Okay? So we explain the logical connection by helping the readers follow your patterns. You want to give them a relationship between the paragraphs, much like you want a smooth shift between third and fourth gear, or 12th and 13th gear in a semi. You do also want a smooth shift in your writing. You don't want to jar your readers' sensibilities when they're reading things. Okay? You might bring up that things are similar or unsimilar, dissimilar. You might also give a guidance based on time. Okay? You've seen this happen in documents. First, we did this. Second, we did this. Third, this happened. Last, this happened. And you always want to, if you start with the first, you should have at least a last, and probably at least a second or third mention in there, using those words. And when you have a longer paper, which might happen in this junior-senior level course, you would say things like, in short, as has been said on the whole, to remind the reader of what has happened previously. Okay. You will plan and execute your transitions. This happens as you're getting all your words on the paper. Make yourself a note as to how you're going to get from point A to point B. This is an example of, maybe a bad transition. We want to get from here to here, but our writing takes us all the way around here, and we have to come back. If you write this way, once you get back to this point, you can add a transition word or two and a thought that reconnects this point. But this is a problem in writing. You take a rabbit trail off to the woods and you don't know what's happening. Here are some examples of those transitional type words we were looking at or talking about. And I've grabbed this from the Writing Center at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, a very nice resource online. This is the type of transition over here. So if you're talking about similarity, sequence, time order, cause and effect, these are some effective transitional words on the right hand side that would be appropriate to use in your writing. And I talked about this on that previous slide. First, second, third, next, then, finally. Much like our correlative conjunctions. If you have a not only, then you should have a but also. If you're using a sequence or time order, you should have a first and always a finally, and maybe things in between. You can use emphasis, even, indeed. You can talk about positional transitions. Above, below, next to, fancy word, adjacent there, in front and back, etc. Okay. Hopefully this makes sense to you. This slide deck is available for download from our online course page, so make sure you do that and you'll have all of these. You can also look in our book or look up online transitional words and expressions used in technical writing, and you can have a bunch at your fingertips. So do some work, get your Sherlock Holmes badge out, and let's work on becoming better technical writers. Okay. Here are some of the places that I gathered content for this talk, and we want to make sure everything fits smoothly together like these two guys trying to push this puzzle piece. And that brings us to the end of transitions, and stay tuned for some final comments. Wow, transitions are an incredibly useful feature in our writing. First, we looked at the example of a transmission to transition between gears in a car. Then we talked about where they might be used in a document, like paragraphs and between paragraphs. And lastly, we looked at some examples of words. So take these into heart, use them in your writing, and we'll be good to go. Professor B out, and stay tuned for more episodes.